Welcome to Blender Basics, a beginner's guide to 3D modeling, animation, and rendering using Blender, the powerful open source software. In this tutorial, we'll take you through the fundamentals of Blender, from navigating the interface to creating your first 3D object. First things first, you're gonna need to download Blender from blender.org. So just type into Google Blender and you'll take to this page, blender.org. You download the file, the Blender 4.0. Download Blender for whichever system you have, either Windows or Mac OS, and download it. I already have it downloaded, so I won't be doing it. Install it to your preferred folder, and that should be a fairly easy process to make. Once you open up Blender, you'll be greeted with a scene like this. There's a cube, a camera, and a light. You can click on the objects to select them, and you'll see on the right hand side, on the top right hand side, which object you have selected. To pan around the view, you can click the middle mouse button and you can rotate around the object you've selected. You can pan around the view using the middle mouse button. You can zoom in, zoom out with the mouse wheel, and then you can move objects. It's not as simple as just clicking and dragging. You need to click and then you click G and you can move the object around. You can snap it to whichever axis you want by clicking X, Y, and Z. And if you right mouse click, you cancel the transformation. You can also turn on the axis for the object by clicking the button on the left hand side and the move tool, and there will be axes which you can move by clicking and dragging. You can click and drag, object will move according to what you want. The interface, on the top hand side you have your file, edit, render, window, help. To render an image, you need to click on render image. I have my own workspace. This is the basic layout workspace. There's modeling, there's sculpting, there's UV editing, texture painting, shading, animation, rendering, compositing, geometry nodes, and scripting. Keep in mind that you can create your own workspace by moving windows. So if you come with your mouse to the edge of the window, you can create a new window. You can drag a window out, and then on the top left hand side there's a button and you can change what that window will show. So in this case I want this window to show the shader editor, and there's no material, so there's nothing to see, and you can collapse windows by clicking and dragging upwards, and you collapse the window. You can find the timeline. This is used for animation. There's 250 frames by default. You can change that to whatever you like, and you can keyframe objects. Keyframing is setting a set position for that object in a certain time in the timeline, and then changing that position later in the timeline, and the object will move according to the keyframes you created. On the right hand side there's the object, there's the outliner In the outliner, you can find the objects you have in the scene. So one command for you is Shift A, and if you create Shift A and create something, it will appear in the scene where the 3D cursor is selected. To change the 3D cursor, you shift right click, and if for some reason you want the 3D cursor to come back to the center position of the world, you can Shift S and cursor to world origin, and then the cursor is back in the world origin. It's helpful because you can sometimes need to put an object somewhere in the scene, and you need the 3D cursor to be somewhere else to help you create an object in that position. So now if you look at the outliner, we have a cube, we have an icosphere, and we have a sphere. You can select objects in the outliner, and you can copy and paste the objects in the outliner, like copy and paste the object in the outliner. Same thing you can do is Shift D. That will duplicate the object, and you can have as many objects as you want in your scene. The tabs down here, there's a lot of options. There's rendering options, output options, layer options, scene options, world options, collection options, object options, modifiers, particle systems, physics, constraints, and data, and material, and texture. For the first time using Blender, let's start by deleting everything. By the way, I'm deleting by pressing X on the keyboard. So you select an object, click X, and delete the object. X is for deletion. Shift A is for adding new objects. R is for rotating an object. You can also rotate an object by its local axis by clicking X while rotating is active, Y or Z. And then if you right click, it cancels the movement. Let's delete the cube. Let's add a sphere. And down here under the left hand side, there's a couple of settings for the sphere that you can use. The number of segments, so the number of cuts the sphere has. If you up this number, it will render slower on your computer, but the sphere will have more definition. The number of rings is the horizontal lines. The same thing applies. The more you have, the more definition the sphere will have. Then if you click out of the sphere, those settings go away and you cannot change them anymore. You can only change them once you bring the object to life. You can also scale the objects by pressing S on the keyboard, and you can scale them. You can scale them over the axis that you chose. So you can press SX and it will scale along the x-axis. SY, it will scale along the y-axis. SZ, it will scale along the z-axis. And to cancel that movement, you press the right mouse button. So let's delete our sphere. Let's add the cube now. And let's learn about edit mode. So this is object mode. You're seeing it's a mode where we can move the objects, and then we can make all sorts of alterations to the object, and it's a basic way of moving the objects in the scene. But there's also edit mode, and once we enter edit mode, we see the vertices composing our object, and the faces and the edges that compose our object. So we can, a rule of thumb, we want to scale our objects in edit mode just so the object maintains a proper scale. So if I scale this object outside of edit mode, the scale is gonna be 3.23, and we'll have to do Control A, apply the scale to bring it back to 1, so it doesn't create issues with texturing and UV mapping and so on. So I'm Control Z. If you click Control Z, you can go back one step. In edit mode, we can manipulate the cube in different ways by using the same commands we use in object mode. So in this case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click 1, or I go to the top panel right next to the view selected add mesh, and I click on the first panel, and I can select a vertex, and by selecting a vertex I can now move this vertex wherever I want. I can select multiple vertex by shift clicking the other vertex, and that will select an edge, and then I can move this edge whatever I want. If we click 2 on the keyboard, we go into edge select mode, and we can select the edges instead of selecting singular vertex. So now we can go down here, select an edge, GZ, and now we have a weird cube. You can also click on 3 on your keyboard, and that will go into face select mode, and you will select the full face instead of selecting vertexes. So you can select this face, G, Y, and now we have a slim, almost triangular shape. Can go into edge select, bring that up, and now we have a ramp. So this were the basics of Blender. There's tab, you click tab to enter edit mode. You press G to move the object around. You press the X, Y, and Z to move its local axis. You click right click to cancel the movement. You have the move tool on the left hand side where you can move the object easier if you don't want to use G. There's S to scale. One second. There's S to scale. If this is happening, it's because the origin of the origin of our geometry is decentered from the object. You press F3, origin to geometry, and now your origin is in the middle of your geometry. If you want to add this to quick favorites, origin to geometry, you go to F3, type origin to geometry, you right click and click add to quick favorites. And now if you press Q on your keyboard, you have a pop-up menu and you can click origin to geometry, and now your object should move according to that specification. I know it's a lot to unwrap. I know the program may seem very daunting, but once you get grasp with the small stuff, you'll be doing amazing things in no time. So to recap, G to move, use X, Y and Z to move in its local axis, right click to cancel, S to scale, R to rotate, and you use the middle mouse button to pan around the view, and you use shift middle mouse button to go sideways in the view. That was all for our first introduction for the world of Blender 3D. Remember, practice makes perfect, so don't be afraid to experiment and explore all the features Blender has to offer. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Like, comment and subscribe. Anything you have to say that will help me improve my videos, that will be much appreciated. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.